Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Monster Families. Today, we're going to be going over a very weird monster in the world of Diablo 2, and you might be wondering why is it a weird monster? And the answer is that it's one of the few monsters in the game that actually crosses all the boundaries of monster types in Diablo 2. So, if you've played Diablo 2 for a while, you would know that there are three different types of monsters within the game. There are animals, which are generally, things like big giant brutes or creatures. It's just any creature in general which doesn't fit into the category of undead or demon. There is undead, of course, which are monsters that are dead, and then there is, of course, demons, which are, from hell itself. Well, the interesting thing about the Vulture demon is that it's not a demon or an undead in some cases. The carrion bird is actually an animal and is unaffected by things like Holy Bolt, as an example, whereas the Undead Scavenger, which I'm currently looking at right now in Diablo 2, is an undead version of the same exact beast. On top of this, there's also a demon version called the Hell Buzzard, and then sometimes goes back to being an animal with the Winged Nightmare. There's also a guest version of this particular monster called the Carrion Bird, which is also an animal based monster. In fact, this beast is like all over the place. Arit Summit says, believed to be mutated offspring of the large native vultures that once inhabited these deserts, the vulture demons seek only to kill and consume mortal beings that cross their path. The giant vultures of old were, for the most part, scavengers who ate only dead or dying, and now befouled, these creatures circle the desert in search of live prey. Their razor-sharp beaks and talons can cause deep wounds, and a group of these demons can quickly bring down a victim. Although impossible to target while in flight, these vultures must land to attack and are vulnerable when on the ground. Often these creatures are flying high above, and when you with above the reach of your character, and in order to destroy them, you'll have to wait for them to land. And that's kind of like the crazy part about them is they're really annoying to kill. When they're on the ground, they're vulnerable. However, when they're not on the ground and they're flying away, they basically cannot be targeted during that particular time period. Um, in most cases, like you can sometimes goad them into combat. In fact, you could probably taunt them or use other abilities to force them into combat. But whenever they're in the air, you can't hit them. And sometimes they even get stuck in the air, I've noticed, depending on like the area and how things are working, which can make them somewhat annoying. When they are on the ground and they are trying to kill you, then that's a good time because then you can kill them relatively easily. When they're not on the ground, honestly, sometimes you just probably ignore them. There's also an odd quirk with the Vulture Demons, which is that they don't drop weapons no matter what. So for some reason or another, weapons and armor are off limits when it comes to the Vulture Demons. Now this should technically increase their chances of dropping runes, but for some reason or another, I did some research and basically found that it does not actually increase their chance of dropping runes. So they're basically about the same as any other monster, despite the fact that they can't drop weapons and armor. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, but I've seen a Vulture Demon drop a weapon or armor. Now, it only applies to the base types. If you have a champion or an elite, it does not apply to those because champion elites are given different statuses. But the actual like base type vulture demons for some reason will not drop weapons and armor, which is actually a recurring theme across quite a few different monster types, and we'll be talking about those when we get to them. But things like gloams and swarms and ghosts also do not drop weapons and armor either. So it's an actual thing that happens across the charts. Now, Vulture Demons aren't really particularly very good to farm or kill because they generally tend to be very inefficient in terms of killing them. Like, if they're on the ground and you can shoot them, sure, do it. But most of the time, if they're in the air, there's no reason to wait for them. Like, they don't have the greatest drops in the game. There's a very limited chance that they might drop you a good ring or an amulet. Their EXP isn't amazing, and it's just not really worth the trouble for the most part. Their resistances aren't particularly very high. As you can see here, they have no physical resistance, but they do have 15 to 23% block chance. They have no magic resistance, they have no cold resistance, and except for in hell difficulty, they have no lightning resistance. And only two of the variations are immune to lightning, the Undead Scavenger and the Winged Nightmare. They also have no fire resistance, except for the Hell Buzzard, and in Hell difficulty, the Hell Buzzard does have 100% fire resistance, and then the Hell versions of each of them only have 25% fire res. So not particularly very strong against hardly any elements. They do have some poison resistance, and the Carrion bird, which is the animal version, does have 110 poison. But most of them have either 0 or 25% poison res, which isn't very high. The Act 5 version, which is the Carrion bird guest monster, does have really high poison resistance and a little bit of cold res, but for the most part tends to be relatively low as well. They don't really have very high HP either, especially when you consider some of the highest monsters in the game have around like 20,000 HP. The Vultures only have 2,000 to 5,149, which actually puts them really low. Kind of in the Fallen bracket, although not quite the Fallen bracket. But if you take a look at like the Act 1 Fallen, which are some of the weaker monsters in the game, that don't really have a lot of HP. The highest HP on a Fallen is 3,273. And the highest HP on the Vulture is 5,149, which is still pretty close to the Fallen. So they're only slightly above the Fallen, and some of them actually being below the Fallen at 2,575, which puts them in that range. So easy to kill if you can shoot them, but if they're flying in the air and they refuse to come down, I would just generally ignore them because they're just not worth killing. I think that's pretty much it for these guys. Other than the fact that they change alliances, essentially, between the different factions of hell, between animal, undead, demon, and animal. They just constantly flip back and forth depending on which one you see. It should be a dead giveaway, though, if you see the Undead Scavenger that he's undead, because it literally says Undead Scavenger in his name. Whereas if you are fighting the Hell Buzzard, it should be a dead giveaway as well because it says Hell Buzzard, so he is from Hell, obviously. Although they do actually say Undead or Demon underneath of their names. However, all the other ones are animal-based, so you're not going to be able to kill those with your Holy Bolts or your Fist of the Heavens or relatively other abilities. Honestly, though, it doesn't really matter. Like, whether you can kill them or not, most of the time, these monsters are just generally best ignored unless they actually come and fight you. Now, if they actually come and fight you, kill them. Murder them. Murder them with impunity. But if they are ignoring you, if they're flying in the air, if they're trying to avoid you with every fiber of their being, just ignore them. There really isn't much reason to actually fight them unless they're actually going to come and fight you. And if they do, then lay them down and don't let them get back up. Most of the time, I think the flying really only becomes an issue when you can't dish out good damage. And I think that's really the main thing, is they tend to be more annoying when your character sucks, essentially. I hate to put it that way, but that's pretty much it. They're more annoying when your character sucks. Now, another interesting thing about these guys, and this is something that's kind of across the board on a lot of monsters, is some monsters have the ability to apply additional effects. Now, the normal monsters, the Carrion Bird, the Undead Scavenger, the Hell Buzzard, and the Winged Nightmare do not have this, but for some reason, the Vulture Demon, known as the Carrion Bird in Act 5, which is one of the guest monsters, does have a chance to poison you when it hits you. So these guys can be a little bit more annoying because they will hit you with a crit poison, and the crit poison will take all your HP away. So these can be a little bit more of a pain in the butt and a little bit more of a reason for you to avoid them, just simply because nobody likes to get crit poisoned all the time. And so if they manage to hit you, they may not do very much physical damage, but there's a very good chance they can crit poison you and take all your HP away in an instant. So don't be confused on these guys here. The Act 5 versions are definitely more nasty than the earlier versions, just simply because of this. And I think that pretty much covers everything with the Vulture Demons. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining me. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button if you are enjoying the content. This is my full-time job, so it definitely helps out to support the channel. As always, keep watching.